Long before Akron became a symbol of industrial dominance, its fate was quietly shaped by geography that most people at the time saw as nothing more than convenience. But in reality, the city sat on a rare intersection of water, elevation, and emerging transport routes that would later define its destiny. At the heart of this advantage was its position along the Ohio and Erie Canal, a man-made artery carved through the American landscape in the early 19th century. This canal was not just a water route. It was a technological statement of its era, designed to connect the agricultural interior of Ohio with the commercial lifelines of the Great Lakes and the Atlantic markets beyond. Akron, sitting near the canal's summit point, occupied one of its most strategically important positions. Unlike cities located at lower elevations where water flow was easier, but less controllable, Akron's elevated terrain created a unique engineering challenge that engineers turned into an advantage. The canal system here relied on a carefully designed series of locks and hydraulic controls that managed a steady water flow across uneven terrain. This allowed the city to function as a kind of controlled distribution point, where goods could be stored, transferred, and redirected with remarkable efficiency for the time. The water itself became a form of infrastructure, not just for transportation, but for power. Mills began to appear along the canal's edge, using the steady flow to grind grain and process raw materials. What started as a simple logistical advantage quickly evolved into a foundation for industrial capability. As the 19th century progressed, Akron's position on the canal transformed it into a natural hub for trade. Raw materials like timber, coal, and grain moved through its locks in massive quantities, while finished goods flowed outward toward expanding eastern markets. The cost efficiency of canal transport compared to horse-drawn wagons gave Akron-based producers a decisive edge. Shipping expenses dropped dramatically, allowing local businesses to scale in ways that would have been impossible just a generation earlier. This economic efficiency did more than stimulate trade. It reshaped the structure of the local economy itself, encouraging the formation of secondary industries that depended on predictable, low-cost logistics. But geography alone was not enough to guarantee long-term dominance. The real turning point came with the arrival of railroads in the mid to late 19th century. Unlike canals, which were seasonal and relatively slow, rail systems introduced speed, flexibility, and year-round reliability. Akron did not lose its canal advantage when the railroads arrived. Instead, it gained a layered infrastructure system that few cities could match. Rail lines were deliberately constructed alongside existing canal routes, creating junction points where goods could seamlessly transition between water and rail transport. This multimodal system allowed manufacturers to optimize costs and delivery times depending on demand, season, or urgency. This integration of canal and rail did more than improve logistics. It fundamentally changed the city's economic identity. Akron was no longer just a stop along a water route. It became a distribution nexus where multiple transport systems converged. Factories began to position themselves near these junctions, minimizing the friction between production and shipment. The efficiency of this system attracted investment from outside the region, as manufacturers recognized the strategic value of a city that could move goods faster and cheaper than most competitors. By the time industrialization began accelerating across the United States, Akron already possessed something most cities were still trying to build: a fully functional, dual-layer transport infrastructure embedded directly into its geography. Waterways provided bulk movement and cost efficiency, while railroads delivered speed and reach. Together, they created a self-reinforcing system that reduced logistical uncertainty and encouraged large-scale industrial planning. In hindsight, it was not just the presence of these systems that mattered, but their alignment within a single geographic corridor. What appeared at first to be a simple advantage of location had, over time, become a structural foundation for industrial expansion. Akron's geography did not merely support growth, it directed it, shaped it, and quietly locked the city into a trajectory that would define its rise long before the first major corporation ever arrived. At first, the transformation of Akron did not come with dramatic announcements or sudden breakthroughs, but with a quiet shift in industrial attention that would slowly reshape the city's entire identity. The infrastructure was already in place, the canals still carrying their steady flow of goods, the rail lines already stitching Akron into a wider commercial map. But what arrived next was something far more powerful than logistics alone. It was capital, ambition, and a new kind of industrial vision that saw the city not as a waypoint, but as a production engine. The earliest signs of this shift came when rubber manufacturing began to move from experimental production into full-scale industrial application. What had once been a niche material used in small mechanical components suddenly became central to a rapidly modernizing economy. The expansion of bicycles, followed by the explosive rise of automobiles, created an unprecedented demand for durable, mass-produced rubber products. Akron, with its unmatched access to transportation routes and industrial water systems, became an obvious candidate for large-scale manufacturing. But what truly triggered the transformation was not geography alone, but the calculated decisions of major companies searching for efficiency, control, and long-term dominance. As industrial leaders evaluated locations across the United States, Akron offered something rare: a combination of low transportation costs, reliable access to raw materials, and an existing industrial workforce shaped by decades of canal and rail commerce. This made it uniquely attractive to companies looking to scale rapidly without rebuilding infrastructure from scratch. Once the first major rubber firms established operations in the city, momentum began to build in a self-reinforcing cycle. Each new factory made Akron more attractive to the next, and each expansion tightened the city's dependency on this emerging industrial identity. The arrival of these companies was not just about production facilities, it was about the creation of entire industrial ecosystems. Massive factory complexes began to rise along transport corridors, strategically positioned to take advantage of both rail sidings and canal access points. These were not isolated plants, but interconnected systems of manufacturing, storage, and distribution designed for continuous output. Raw rubber, once imported in limited quantities, now flowed into the city in increasing volumes, while finished goods were shipped outward to national and international markets with unprecedented speed. As production scaled, so did the complexity of the workforce. Thousands of laborers migrated to Akron, drawn by the promise of stable industrial wages. Entire neighborhoods expanded almost overnight, forming dense urban zones clustered around factory districts. The rhythm of daily life began to synchronize with industrial output, as shifts, whistles, and production cycles dictated the movement of the city itself. What had once been a regional trade hub was rapidly becoming a manufacturing capital, defined by constant motion and relentless output. The economic impact of this transformation was immediate and visible. Local businesses adapted to serve the growing population of workers, while municipal systems expanded to support the rising demands of housing, transportation, and public services. Tax revenues increased, infrastructure projects multiplied, and the city's administrative structure evolved to manage the scale of industrial activity. Akron was no longer simply benefiting from industry. It was being fundamentally reshaped by it. At the center of this expansion stood a small group of dominant companies whose influence extended far beyond factory walls. Their decisions shaped not only production output, but also urban development, labor organization, and even municipal policy. As these firms expanded their operations, they began to define the economic logic of the entire city. Every new facility reinforced the same pattern: greater production capacity, higher employment, and deeper integration between corporate strategy and urban growth. The result was a rapid acceleration that few cities of the era could match. In a relatively short span of time, Akron transitioned from a modest transport-linked town into a concentrated hub of industrial manufacturing. The rubber industry did not simply arrive in Akron, it restructured it. And as production lines multiplied and factory complexes expanded, the city entered a new phase where its identity, economy, and future became inseparable from the industries that had chosen it as their base of operations. At the center of Akron's accelerating industrial expansion was a quiet but powerful shift in how cities themselves were being shaped, not by gradual civic planning alone, but by the direct influence of corporations that now operated at a scale large enough to design entire urban environments around their needs. What began as factory placement soon evolved into something far more complex: a structured alignment between corporate ambition and municipal decision-making, where the growth of the city became inseparable from the priorities of its largest employers. As industrial production intensified, Labor demand surged beyond anything the existing population could supply. Companies responded not by waiting for organic growth, but by actively engineering it. Recruitment networks expanded across rural regions and other states, pulling in waves of workers who arrived with little more than the promise of steady wages. This influx was not random, it was strategically managed, timed to match factory expansion cycles and production targets. The city's population growth became, in effect, a reflection of corporate output rather than independent urban evolution. But attracting workers was only the first layer. Once inside the city, labor needed to be stabilized, organized, and retained. This gave rise to structured employment systems that extended far beyond the factory floor. Work shifts were precisely regulated, often running around the clock to maximize machine utilization. Entire production schedules were divided into synchronized cycles, ensuring that equipment never stood idle. This constant rhythm of labor created a new urban tempo, where time itself became subordinate to industrial demand. Housing soon emerged as the next critical frontier of control and coordination. As populations expanded rapidly, private companies and local authorities began aligning their efforts to construct worker neighborhoods positioned in direct proximity to manufacturing centers. These were not accidental settlements, but deliberately planned zones designed to reduce commute times, increase productivity, and maintain workforce stability. Streets, housing blocks, and transportation routes were often laid out in direct relation to factory locations, creating a spatial dependency between home and workplace that reinforced economic attachment to industry. Within these districts, daily life became tightly interwoven with corporate structure. Stores, services, and basic amenities often clustered around industrial zones, forming semi-self-contained communities whose economic survival depended on factory continuity. In many cases, even essential services such as housing loans or basic utilities were influenced, directly or indirectly, by corporate policies. The city was no longer a neutral space of residence and commerce. It was becoming a managed environment where economic life and industrial output were deeply fused. Municipal governments, facing the scale of expansion, increasingly adapted their policies to accommodate industrial priorities. Incentives began to emerge as a central tool in attracting and retaining large manufacturers. These incentives were not abstract economic gestures, but concrete structural commitments. Tax adjustments, land allocations, infrastructure development, and regulatory flexibility designed to reduce operational friction for corporations. In exchange, cities expected job creation, population stability, and rising tax bases, forming a mutual dependency that shaped urban policy for decades. This alignment between corporate needs and municipal strategy created a feedback loop that accelerated growth even further. As incentives drew more companies into the city, labor demand increased, which justified further housing expansion and infrastructure investment. Each new industrial arrival reinforced the system, tightening the integration between public administration and private production. The city evolved into a coordinated machine where governance and industry operated in parallel rather than in separation. Yet beneath this rapid coordination lay an underlying structural dependency. The more the city expanded in response to corporate needs, the more its stability relied on the continued success of a small number of dominant industries. Urban development, labor systems, and public finance all became tied to the same industrial heartbeat. What appeared as prosperity on the surface was in reality a tightly interlocked system of mutual reliance, where the fortunes of the city and its corporations were no longer distinguishable from one another. At its height, Akron no longer functioned as a regional industrial center in the traditional sense. It had become something far more concentrated and intense, a production nucleus embedded within the wider machinery of American and global manufacturing. The scale of activity was no longer measured in isolated factories or individual companies, but in interconnected systems of output that operated continuously, feeding both domestic expansion and international demand. What had begun as localized industrial growth had evolved into a synchronized economic engine running at full capacity. The foundation of this dominance was mass production, refined through years of industrial experimentation and logistical optimization. Factories in Akron were no longer just manufacturing goods. They were operating as high-efficiency production lines designed to maximize output with minimal interruption. Raw materials entered the city in steady flows, processed through tightly controlled stages of manufacturing. and exited as finished products destined for a rapidly expanding global market. Every step was calibrated for volume, speed, and consistency, creating an industrial rhythm that defined the city's identity. As production systems matured, labor itself became fully integrated into this structure. Tens of thousands of workers operated across multiple shifts, ensuring that factories remained active around the clock. This continuous cycle of production turned time into a resource as valuable as raw materials. The city's workforce was not simply employed. It was synchronized into a larger industrial mechanism where every shift change, every machine cycle, and every delivery schedule contributed to a unified output system. Akron's economy was no longer seasonal or cyclical. It was perpetual. The true acceleration of this system came during periods of heightened national and global demand, particularly during wartime economies when industrial output became a strategic necessity. Factories in the city rapidly reoriented production to meet urgent requirements, scaling operations far beyond peacetime levels. Manufacturing lines that once focused on consumer goods were repurposed for military and logistical support materials, embedding Akron deeply into national supply chains. The urgency of wartime demand removed previous constraints on production, pushing factories to operate at maximum capacity for sustained periods. This surge in demand did more than increase output. It fundamentally integrated Akron into global industrial networks. Finished goods produced in the city were no longer confined to regional or national distribution. They became part of international supply chains that connected American manufacturing to distant markets and allied economies. Shipping routes expanded, logistics systems became more complex, and corporate coordination extended across borders. Akron's factories were now nodes in a much larger industrial web, responding not only to local management but also to global economic signals. As this integration deepened, corporate coordination across industries became increasingly sophisticated. Major manufacturing firms optimized supply chains to reduce delays, synchronize production schedules, and balance material flows across multiple facilities. Akron benefited from this coordination as its infrastructure allowed for efficient scaling and rapid distribution. Rail systems, storage networks, and factory clusters functioned as a unified logistical ecosystem, capable of handling unprecedented volumes of production without collapsing under pressure. The city's economic output reached levels that positioned it as one of the most important industrial hubs in the broader manufacturing landscape. Its production figures were not just high, they were structurally embedded into the functioning of entire industries, from automotive supply chains to heavy manufacturing sectors. Demand cycles in distant markets directly influenced activity within its factories, creating a feedback loop where global consumption patterns dictated local industrial intensity. At the same time, this peak of dominance reinforced the city's dependence on external forces. While Akron appeared powerful, its position was increasingly tied to fluctuations in global demand, corporate strategy shifts, and technological advancements beyond its control. The same systems that enabled its rise, mass production, integration, and specialization, also made it sensitive to changes in those very systems. For a time, however, none of these vulnerabilities were visible on the surface. What defined the city was scale, speed, and output at levels that few industrial centers could match. The sound of continuous machinery, the constant movement of materials, and the uninterrupted flow of goods created an environment where industrial activity itself seemed limitless. In this moment, Akron stood fully realized as a production powerhouse, deeply embedded in the global industrial order that it had helped to accelerate. At first, the decline did not arrive as a rupture or sudden collapse, but as a slow shift in the underlying mechanics that had once sustained the entire city. The same industrial systems that had powered Akron's rise began to change in ways that were subtle at first, almost invisible at the local level, yet decisive in their long-term consequences. Factories continued to operate, production lines still moved, and the city's industrial identity remained intact on the surface. But the foundations beneath it were already beginning to realign. The first major force of disruption came through technological transformation. Manufacturing processes that had once relied on dense human labor and large physical plants began shifting toward more automated and efficient systems. New production methods reduced the need for extensive factory floors and large workforces, concentrating output into fewer, more technologically advanced facilities. What had once required thousands of workers could now be achieved with a fraction of the labor, fundamentally altering the balance between production capacity and employment. As these technologies advanced, older industrial systems in Akron began to lose their competitive edge. Factories that had once defined global output were now built around methods that were increasingly considered outdated in terms of efficiency and cost. Retooling required massive capital investment, and not every company was willing or able to absorb that cost at the same pace as global competitors. Gradually, production began to shift toward regions where newer facilities could be built from the ground up, optimized for emerging technologies rather than legacy infrastructure. This technological transition overlapped with a broader process of globalization that redefined industrial geography. Manufacturing was no longer concentrated in traditional industrial centers. Instead, it began to spread across international networks where labor costs, regulatory environments, and production efficiencies could be optimized on a global scale. Companies that had once been deeply rooted in Akron started reorganizing their operations across multiple countries, dividing production stages across different regions to reduce costs and increase flexibility. As global supply chains expanded, Akron's role within them began to diminish. The city that had once been a central hub of production became one node among many, no longer essential to the functioning of entire industrial systems. Decision-making power shifted away from local facilities toward corporate headquarters and international management structures that prioritized global efficiency over regional continuity. Factories that had once anchored the city's economy were now evaluated not by their historical importance, but by their position within a worldwide cost-benefit framework. This shift had immediate consequences for employment. As production lines became more automated and distributed globally, the demand for large industrial labor forces declined sharply. Jobs that had once sustained entire neighborhoods began to disappear, not through sudden closure, but through gradual reduction, restructuring, and relocation. Entire departments were consolidated, shifts were eliminated, and hiring slowed until it effectively stopped. The rhythm of work that had once defined daily life in the city began to fade. Corporate withdrawal followed this same pattern of gradual disengagement. Instead of abrupt exits, companies slowly reduced their physical presence, closing certain facilities while maintaining minimal operations in others. Administrative functions were relocated, research divisions were consolidated elsewhere, and investment in local infrastructure declined. Each decision, taken individually, appeared rational within a global corporate strategy, but collectively they produced a steady erosion of the city's industrial base. As industrial activity weakened, the economic ripple effects spread outward through the urban environment. Local businesses that had depended on factory workers saw declining demand. Housing markets softened as population growth stalled and then reversed. Municipal revenues began to shrink, limiting the city's ability to maintain infrastructure at the scale it once supported. The interconnected system that had once fueled expansion now began to contract under its own weight. What made this decline particularly profound was its structural nature. It was not caused by a single failure or catastrophic event, but by the cumulative effect of technological evolution, global economic restructuring, and shifting corporate priorities. Each factor reinforced the others, creating a feedback loop that gradually pulled industrial activity away from the city. Over time, Akron transitioned from being a center of production to a location defined by the absence of the very systems that had once sustained it, leaving behind an economic landscape shaped as much by withdrawal as by its earlier rise.